of the Children and Families Overview and Scrutiny. As usual, this meeting is being broadcast live via the County Council's website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Can I please ask that all members and officers have their microphones on mute until they wish or are invited to speak? And could you also make sure your phones turn to silent? I have received apologies from Canon Carolyn Scheuer. Those of you that don't recognise the name, that was Mrs. Lewis. And don't know, but anyway, her name's changed. Mrs. Taylor, the Cabinet Lead Member for Children and Families, is joining us online for this meeting, and she's on the screen with us. First item of today's agenda is the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of September, pages 5 to 12 in your agenda pack. I move that these are taken as read, confirmed, and signed. Do you confirm?
I would second.
Agenda item 2 is question time. I have received no questions from members of the public. Item 3, I have received a question from Mr. Hunt. The question and its response have been circulated to members of the committee prior to the start of the meeting and will be taken as read. I would like to remind members that no discussion is to be held on these. I will invite Mr. Hunt to ask a supplementary question if you would like to, Mr. Hunt.
Not necessary, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. Item 4, I have no urgent items. Item 5, declarations of interest. Do any members have any interest that they wish to declare? Item 6, declarations of party whip. Do any members wish to declare a party whip? I don't believe so. Item 7, I have not received any petitions. So we then move on to the first item, which is a report on Leicestershire's response to tackling child criminal exploitation. Page 13 to 50 of your agenda pack. So I'll move to Sharon. You'll take us through that. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I'm joined today by Sam Stone, who's the service manager for the area, who provided the report. So I will take you through. I will take you through briefly the outline of the report, and then Sam can provide you with any further detail, and we'll answer any questions that you may have. So the purpose of the report is to provide the committee with an overview of the work and progress of the Child Exploitation, Missing and Modern Slavery Hub. And the committee received the last report in November of last year. Paragraph 2 of the report outlines the strategic priority that this area of work remains for the local authority and for our statutory partners around sexual exploitation and the safeguarding of children and young people. And it references the local authority's child exploitation framework, which was refreshed and reviewed and agreed this year and runs until 2026. It's an appendix at the back of the report for members if they wish to see it. So paragraph 3 onwards takes you through the background, the establishment of the Vulnerability Hub, and the work that has been presented to this committee on numerous occasions. And paragraph 7 onwards to 11 takes you through the activity and more recent updates. So a decision was made across the partnership to bring together the Child Criminal Exploitation Operations Group with our responsibilities to serious youth violence, and formulate one partnership group that meets regularly is attended by ADs and other senior officers across the partnership, and it's currently chaired. The moved from the county to the city this year, so that is currently chaired by my counterpart in the city. Paragraph 8 outlines that the previous theme for a joint targeted area inspection was around serious youth violence. So we used the opportunity to come together as a partnership and audit a number of cases for children across the 3 local authorities across Leicestershire, Leicester City and Rutland. And work with our partners to look at what some of the key themes and learning from those audits brought about. And we are moving forward an action plan in relation, follow up from that audit. We have had a Child Exploitation Awareness Day that was held in March of this year. And as the committee received reports last time, in April, we received our Ofsted inspection. For part of that inspection, the inspectors looked at the work of our vulnerability hub, and we've provided within the report some really positive feedback that the inspectors gave to the quality of the work that's undertaken to young people in this area of work. Paragraph 12 onwards takes you through some of the performance activity of both our children who are subject to child sexual exploitation and the children that are subject to child criminal exploitation, and gives you those figures of referrals and the profile of those young people, and also the data around young people who go missing. So as the next steps, there's a commitment across the partnership to continue to improve our response to those young people who are at risk of serious youth violence, children who go missing and children who are subject to exploitation. And we work and continue to work in partnership around the focus of an action plan and focus around that area of work. Some key documents have been attached to the report for your information, and Sam and I are happy to take any questions that the panel may have.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come in at this time?
No, it's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mrs. Stone, Ms. Stone, would you like to say anything to add to the report?
I've got nothing else to add. Thank you, Chair.
And I'll open it up to discussion. Mr. Hunt.
Just like to say what a good report it is. So many of these reports are either too long or too short, and it seems to cover work that is more important almost than anything else we do, in my view. My only hesitation is that sometimes we're looking at structures, and there's some structural diagrams which, they look to outsiders as being a bit too convoluted, and that we just hope that all the different responsibilities held by the different groups are all working together, if you see what I mean. That's a minor remark on a very good paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else got any? I think the only thing that I noted was that on page 15 of the report, under paragraph 13, it's respect of gender, the 85% were female, and conversely on the next paragraph, the child criminal exploitation, 81% were male. So it's two distinct categories that, and it is quite a worry, really. But it is an excellent report, but it just highlights the severity of what's going on, and particularly and you see how the numbers, which, you know, sort of child criminal exploitation in Q1, 53 referrals, but those are only the referrals. So how many are hidden that aren't referred? That is one of the worries. And it's same on paragraph 13 for 21 referrals for exploitation. So I don't know if the officers want to comment at all on those figures.
Thank you, Chair. You're quite right. It is a worrying picture around gender, but it's nationally seen like that. In terms of the numbers for child sexual exploitation, we're seeing more children and females referred as well under child criminal exploitation. So I think that's why we're seeing a higher number there as well. But we do accept that child sexual exploitation is a hidden harm as well. So it is recognised amongst the partnerships as well that we're working with.
Thank you very much. No one else, any comments? Right, I take that in as read and noted. Could I just ask Mr. Hunt to turn his microphone off, please? Thank you very much. Now move on to item 9, which is on page 51, your report, and that is the social care placement, market position and sufficiency statement. Jane, I think you're taking this, and also Ian Mellor has joined us. Welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to introduce the report, we are bringing this here for the first time. We thought it would be of interest to members to share with you the work that we've done around market positioning, and really pleased to introduce Ian Mellor, who is our head of service for commissioning. So I'll hand straight over to him. He's going to take us through the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Good afternoon, everybody. As Jane says, my name's Ian Mellor and I'm Head of Service for Commissioning in Children and Family Services. And we've been working over the past 6 months on this document, which is our social care placements, market position and sufficiency statement. We wanted to come here today to give you an update on this work that we've been doing. This document was published online on the 18th of October and is therefore in the public domain. We wanted to give Scrutiny Committee a sense of the purpose of the document, what it contains, and crucially what it means in terms of actions for the department and outcomes for children and young people in Leicestershire and the actions we propose to take over the next 3 years. The audience for this document, as we've set out in the background of the paper, is various. It will hopefully be of interest to the general public, interest to those who are in support of receipt of support through the department, of interest to our strategic partners, including health, the police and the rest of the council. But it also provides a roadmap and a work plan for children and family services, particularly the commissioning service and our adoption service, to ensure that we meet our sufficiency challenges in Leicestershire, which obviously are a concern for us because we want to make sure that children and young people are getting the support and accommodation that they need. It is a legislative requirement for us to have a market position statement under the Children's Act 1989, and that's set out in paragraph 2 of the report. We previously had a market position and sufficiency statement that was live from 2021 to 24, and the document we're discussing today is the refreshed version of that document and covers the period 2024 to 27. So the document is focused on our social care placement sufficiency. So that means it covers the provision that we provide children and young people in Leicestershire in terms of residential support, fostering, supported accommodation and short breaks. And that includes both the provision that we provide internally and the provision that we get through the external market. One of the big differences with the document this time round is that we've been having much greater access to data about need and demand and the services that we currently use in Leicestershire compared with in previous years. And we've tried to make sure that this document is therefore very heavily reliant on data to provide a true factual picture of what is going on in Leicestershire, the problems that we are facing and how we are going to address them. We've also made sure that in the document we do refer to things that we want to do in-house and internally and things that we would like to do and work with the external market. We also recognise that this document is a static document in what is a changing landscape. So although we have published the document and it covers the period 2024 to 27, we will every 6 months be providing a further update online alongside the original document, which will give an overview of progress towards actions that we've set out, but also provide new data or refreshed data if any of the data that we have used for the document changes, and therefore indicate to interested parties what that might mean in terms of future actions for us. That way, hopefully, we'll be able to keep the document a relatively live document and one that's useful for all of our partners. In the paper and in the main document that is now online, we've identified a number of key themes around social care placement sufficiency. I'm going to very quickly run through a few of those now, and then I will move to setting out some of the key actions that we are proposing to take. So in the covering paper on paragraph 10, we set out some of the following key themes which may be of interest to you. So we have noted that there's been a growth in the number of children in care in Leicestershire and a higher number of children returning to care. We've seen an increase in all types of accommodation and support services, so that's fostering, residential and supported accommodation in the last 3 years. Much of that demand reflects an increase in unaccompanied asylum-seeking children, known as UASC, in Leicestershire, and that has definitely made new challenges for us in terms of making sure that we have adequate provision locally for those young people. We've also noted that the age of children coming into their first residential placement has reduced over the last 3 years. In other words, we are seeing more younger aged children going into residential care than we have seen in previous periods. We're also seeing a larger number of young people aged 18 and above placed in supported accommodation, and that has grown significantly since 2021 for both non-UASC and UASC young people. We're also seeing generally more people are being placed in foster and supported accommodation within the county, but when it comes to residential provision, we are unfortunately seeing an increasing reliance on provision outside of the county. And finally, we are continuing to review our short breaks overnight provision that we have on offer for children, and I'll come back to that in some of the actions that we are taking later on in the document. So in terms of how we're going to address some of these sufficiency challenges, we've set out some very broad actions in the market position and sufficiency statement, and these are outlined in paragraph 11 of the report. To quickly go over some of these, we want to obviously explore and manage better the growing numbers of children and young people coming into and returning to care. We want to continue to develop our internal provision, both in terms of fostering and residential provision. That will include looking at how we can perhaps recruit more carers in terms of our own Leicestershire foster carers and specialist carers, but we will also be considering whether we need to develop further internal residential provisions through our Children's Innovation Partnership. We want to make sure that we have greater access to supported accommodation services for young people aged 16 years and above, for both UASC and non-UASC young people. We want to look at the way that we can be more agile in the way that we commission and deliver that support, and want to look at what we can do within our existing commissioning arrangements, as well as considering new arrangements for the future. As I've mentioned, we're going to continue reviewing our short breaks offer, both in terms of overnight residential provision, but also our play and leisure provision in Leicestershire. We also want to do some further data analysis. We recognise from the work that we've done to refresh this document that there are still areas where we could do with further data and greater understanding. So we will, in the next 6 months, be doing some further work to understand provision for parent and children in Leicestershire. We want to understand better the geography of our provisions. We want to understand, for example, if there are areas of the county where we need to develop more types of provision, so there's less of a postcode lottery in terms of where children may be placed. And we also want to do some work to better understand what is affecting the duration of placements, so that again we can plan better for the longer term in terms of internal and external provision. We also want to work with the market to really push and be open and transparent about fairer pricing. And that is a piece of work that we will be doing, particularly with our external market over the next couple of years. And we also want to make sure that as a department, and like the rest of the council, we are ready for the introduction of the Procurement Act from February 2025. So to do all of those things, as I've set out at the very end of the covering paper, we will make sure that we have a detailed action plan that sets out in detail how we'll deliver on some of those key activities. And where possible, we will align that to other action plans that already exist. So, for example, there is already an action plan to increase our internal foster carers, and we will make sure that the actions here are aligned with those actions to remove duplication. We will be spending a lot of time sharing information with the external market, so we will make sure that this document becomes a key source of information for them in all correspondence and events that we hold with them. And hopefully that will allow us to take them on this journey with us and for them to understand what we need from them in the future. And also, we are doing a piece of work at the moment to make sure that the activities outlined in the market position and sufficiency statement are aligned to other strategic targets that we have in the council, including our refreshed medium-term financial strategy, so that we can make sure that the activities that we are taking around sufficiency are consistent with pressures and targets that we have, for example, around savings and, of course, meeting outcomes for children and young people in the best possible way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back at this stage?
No, nothing further. Thank you, Chair.
Right. None of the other officers wish anything added extra at this moment, so I open it up for discussion. Anybody like to? Oh, Mr.
First of all, to thank the President, Mr. Miller, for presenting the report so clearly. And I found it very informative and reassuring. As far as the Procurement Act 2023 is concerned, what practical effect is that likely to have?
Thank you for that question, Mr. Hunt. A lot and a little, if that makes sense. So basically, it is a replacement of existing regulations, but what will mainly happen is that in terms of actual procurement activity that we undertake, there will be a greater emphasis now on making sure that all types of providers, including small providers, have an opportunity to bid for work. So that will largely mean that we have a greater responsibility around things such as publishing notices earlier about our intention to go to the market. There will be a greater number of processes that we have to go through in order to meet the new regulations. So I think in practical terms, probably the greatest change for us as a department will be that our procurement processes will become slightly longer and there'll be more sort of public notices, more steps to go through. But hopefully the net effect of it will be that it means that we can probably engage better with a greater number of providers, including those smaller providers, social enterprises, who under the current regulations, it's been felt have probably been prejudiced slightly in terms of being able to apply for work. So in practical terms, I think probably a lengthening of processes. In terms of actually who we do business with, but potentially a greater number of providers, and that would be my hope.
Thank you very much, Ian. Mr. Smith.
I reiterate what my colleague Mr. Hunt says. It's a good report. Just interesting. Thank you again, Mr. Mellor. Just interesting. You're talking about broadening the offer to smaller providers. Who might that be? Where are we finding these new organisations, associates, or partners? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for that question, Mr. Frisbee. I think they already exist. I think what has happened under current regulations is that larger companies tend to have business managers, for example. Smaller companies don't. So when it comes to tenders, and you've only got 30 days to respond, for example, that can put you at a disadvantage if you don't have dedicated members of staff being able to respond to those contracts. Likewise, if it is your business to understand tenders and to be able to respond to them, that becomes your day job. If you're having to do that on top of perhaps delivering support because you're a smaller organisation or you're a not-for-profit organisation, you don't have the bigger overheads and can have as many staff, that's where I think these regulations will make a difference. But it is, of course, incumbent on us as the local authority to also make sure that when we're reaching out to the market, we're making sure that we aren't just going to people we've always worked with, that we're publicising things more widely. And I think the new process of notices and things that will be introduced for the Procurement Act will help that, but we can also try and build that into our market shaping and market engagement activity going forward.
Can I come back, Chair? Fantastic. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. So is there argument to suggest, without dwelling on this for too long, that we have missed opportunities over the years from some of the smaller, if you like, cottage industry type partners that we might have had?
Potentially. I think when we look at the contracts we have at the moment, we have a wide range of providers already that we work with, ranging from charitable organisations right through to large companies running residential homes. So I don't think we've necessarily missed opportunities. I think probably the processes we've been following, which have been national regulations around procurement, are probably just disadvantaged. I think it is probably also true that, as is true of many things, you tend to work with the same people over and over again. Very often people win contracts again, partly because they've already got the existing experience. So I don't think we've deliberately missed opportunities, but potentially there have been some providers that we may work with in the future that we haven't done in the past. And I guess it remains to be seen if the Procurement Act does support that better. But as I say, I think there is also incumbent on us to make sure our market engagement is as wide-reaching as we can make it.
Thank you, Mr. Mello. That's a very comprehensive answer. Thank you, Chair.
And was there anybody, did you want to come back, Mr. Smith, or were you just pointing out Mr. Frisbee? Okay. Well, an excellent report. Thank you very much, Mr. Mellor, and pleasure to see you here. Right, we now move on to item 10, page 83, which is the proposed transfer of funding from the schools block to the high needs block of the dedicated schools grant. And Jane, I believe you'll take us through this. And Jenny Lawrence, the finance business partner. So Jenny, you're introducing it, and then it goes on to Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the report is setting out the proposal to seek a transfer of 0.5% of funding, so it equates to 2.6 million of funding from the schools block of the dedicated schools grant into the high needs block, so a transfer between blocks. And the proposal is to use this money to establish a special educational needs investment fund to deliver some targeted actions in order to reduce the number of education, health and care plans, or to improve inclusion and support inclusion in mainstream. The decision on a transfer of funding is vested under legislation to the Schools Forum following consultation with all mainstream schools and academies, and local authorities are able to seek approval from the Secretary of State should Schools Forum not approve the proposal, or where the local authority is seeking a transfer in excess of 0.5%. Schools Forum did receive a report on this on the 18th of June, and a further report was presented on the 17th of September, confirming the approach and also setting out the consultation. And the Schools Forum did meet yesterday to consider the proposal, and I'll just briefly share the feedback from Schools Forum on that as well as part of this introduction. We've set out the background to the proposal in full in the appendix to this report. And also all of the views that were submitted in the consultation, and the report does summarise the kind of main views of the from the consultation, and also provides a local authority response to some of those views as well. So essentially, the proposal is around the transfer. The proposal is to do that transfer by essentially capping the gains that schools would get through their increase in funding from 25-26. So schools would cap gains. It does mean that not all schools would be impacted in the same way through the transfer, and that we are proposing to use the funding to create an inclusion fund, essentially to support work back in mainstream schools, predominantly around those children who are experiencing social, emotional and mental health difficulties. We did undertake the consultation. We went out to all Leicestershire maintained schools and academies, and we undertook that consultation in September, October time. There were 70 responses that were received. to the questionnaire. So that is just over 23% of all schools, which is a significant number of responses. And in addition to that, we did receive a number of email responses as well. And whilst we have detailed, there were some duplicate responses. Actually, we considered all responses and have counted all responses in the percentage return and certainly in the percentage feedback as well. So in paragraph 9, we've just set out very briefly the response to the proposals within the consultation. The first question was around the extent to which schools agreed or disagreed with our proposal to create an investment fund. And you can see that 83% of responses didn't agree or strongly disagreed, with the proposal. And predominantly it was around not wanting to agree to the transfer as opposed to not agreeing with the Send Investment Fund. The second question was around agreeing or disagreeing with the proposal around investing the fund in supporting those children with social, emotional, mental health difficulties. And again, you can see that the great majority of responses strongly disagreed with that proposal. But again, it was more about the fact that they fundamentally disagreed with making the proposal in the first place, the transfer in the first place. We did ask for some comments around how the Send Investment Fund could be delivered. But again, the response is largely focused on the disagreement around the transfer in the first place as well. And then the last question was essentially, do you agree with the proposal for an annual funding transfer? And 86% of those who responded strongly disagreed with that as well. So we took the feedback and responses to Schools Forum yesterday, and Schools Forum voted overwhelmingly against both the proposal to create a schools investment fund as well as the schools block transfer as well. And Schools Forum were really clear around the reasons for that. Firstly, was the impact of the capping of gains in schools was actually a real-time decrease in funding for schools. They were supportive of any funding that would go into schools to support inclusion, but were not supportive of utilising a schools block transfer in order to create this budget. And they were really clear that the transfer would increase pressure on school budgets by the kind of capping of gains of school budgets as well. However, having considered all of the feedback and in setting out all of the responses to it, and largely in light of the financial position of the local authority is proposing to pursue the transfer of funding. And you'll see from the paper that went to Schools Forum that the next stage for that is to go to Cabinet to seek approval to go to the Secretary of State for them to agree to a transfer. I'll leave it there if it's okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Jane. This is quite a complicated thing. So there is an agreement in principle that the children need the care, but it's how it's funded.
Not quite. I think schools and local authority and all of us would agree that any funding to support children's development and ability to be as successful as possible in mainstream school is welcomed. What Schools Forum were clear about and school leaders were clear about is that this shouldn't be done through transferring money from the schools block into the high needs block.
Right, I'll open it up to discussion. Mr. Frisbee, and then.
Thank you, Chair. Jane, I apologise. You're going to have to talk to me like I'm a 6-year-old, because I don't understand. Not berating any 6-year-old. I don't understand it. I mean, I would hope that we would be behind anything that enabled, supported, gave opportunity to our children. I'm really speaking on behalf of perhaps the people I represent here. It looks really complex, like just around language. Could you, in just simple Duplo Lego bricks, explain to me what is going on? Thank you. Sorry, Chair. I just need to know it in basic layman's terms, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, it's a completely fair question, and it is a deeply complex matter as well. So I'll go through it as basically as I can. Essentially, there is a pot of funding that comes into the local authority in essence, or into Leicestershire, called the Dedicated Schools Grant. And that grant is made up of 3 distinct areas. One is the schools block, and that's the money that goes to mainstream schools. So it's a kind of in and out process into the local authority. We do very little with it. There is an early years block, which funds all of our early years provision. And there is a high needs block, which funds all of the support for children with special educational needs over and above what's delivered in mainstream school. At the moment, the high needs block is overspending significantly. So we are projecting at the end of this year nearly £22 million overspend on that budget. And as we presented to members previously, there is a cumulative deficit on that budget that is not a sustainable position for the local authority to keep. So what we are, as part of the rules around the dedicated schools grant, we are able to propose moving money from one of the blocks, which is the schools block, into the high needs block. Many local authorities do it. Lots of local authorities do it on an annual basis. It's not something we've done in Leicestershire. If we want to do it, we have to go to the schools forum, which is a forum of school leaders, and ask that they support that transfer. If they supported it, we could have lifted the money and put it into the high needs block and carried on with what we're doing. What we are proposing is that rather than just lifting money from the dedicated schools grant or the schools block of the dedicated schools grant, because we could just propose that we lift the money and pop it in the high needs block and it gets swallowed up into the overspend. We're actually proposing that we lift 2.6 million of the schools block money into the high needs block, and that we spend that, we keep that separate, and we essentially work with schools to develop an inclusion fund. However, so that's a kind of positive idea. It's about putting money back into schools for inclusion. However, in order for us to achieve that, the only way that we can essentially take money from that pot is by not giving schools as much as they were due to get with the annual inflation rise in 25-26. So schools would have been expecting, X amount increase. And the only way that we can take the 2.6 million is by essentially not giving them as much increase as they were due to get. And the challenge that schools understandably gave us is that not all schools will be impacted in the same way, because some schools were set to gain more because they're currently not funded as well, and they will now not gain as much as they were planned to do. So it is deeply complex, but at the bottom line of it is a kind of financial challenge in the high needs block, but also a potential financial challenge for schools as well through the transfer. Does that explain it?
It does, yeah. Hence the language of the borrowing Peter to pay Paul. I've noticed some of that's been embedded in there. Chair, thank you. That was very succinct. Thank you, Jane.
Jane.
Thank you, Chair. Jane, can I just double check something about the schools forum meeting yesterday? Did you say that they were against an investment fund and also against the transfer?
Yes, in essence, they voted against both. So they voted against the investment fund through a schools block transfer and voted against a schools block transfer. It's slightly complex because we're asking them to vote on two things. They were not against the principles of an investment fund. Of course, they'd want more funding invested into mainstream schools to support inclusion, but they were very clear that they did not support the investment fund if it meant transferring money from the schools block to create that.
Okay, and I think one of the things that's come up from the consultation is that they don't see the local authorities having the ability to tackle this issue with the money that we're proposing. And why do you think that is?
Yeah, so members will be able to see that from the consultation responses, a number of schools commented on the LA ability to manage not just the investment fund, but also the high needs block. We've set out in the paper just to kind of help some further understanding about how the high needs block is administered. That the high needs block, which is the block that's overspent, is a block of money that is used to pay essentially for placements for children whose needs cannot be met in mainstream school. It's an entirely needs-led or demand-led budget. So the local authority has little control over the spend of that budget, hence why we're overspending. So we were, in response to the concern around the local authority's ability to manage funding, what we detailed in the report was kind of how that budget essentially works in order to help them understand why it's currently overspending as well. There were some further concerns around any money that potentially was held by the local authority for the inclusion fund being either swallowed up into the deficit or indeed not managed effectively. What we were clear with Schools Forum is that our proposal would be that that investment fund would be very much governed by schools and decided by schools how it was to be spent, but that we couldn't pull all of that detail together because schools were understandably not wanting to work with us on a proposal that they were not going to support as well. So we were able to respond to the kind of concerns about it, but that those concerns primarily come from the fact that the high needs block is consistently overspending, but we did explain to Schools Forum exactly why that was the case.
I suppose it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation in terms of, you want to get the buy-in from the schools to help target the actions that you want to do. But at the end of the day, if they're not on board, you've got to get them done, haven't you? Can you expand on what targeted actions you have in mind for this?
Yeah, so you're entirely right. I think the chicken and egg situation is the funding. So what would be ideal is that we had some additional funding to invest in schools that didn't mean us taking it from schools in the first place. So that would be the ideal situation. And I think both the schools and local authority would be completely supportive of that. So actually schools are working with us at the moment on developing inclusive provision for schools. What we were hoping is that this fund would kind of accelerate some of the work or kind of add more to some of the work that's already going on. So you'll see in the paper that went to Schools Forum, we were proposing quite a few things, but really wanted to work with schools to flesh some of them out. So the fund could be used to support some in-reach support into schools to help them deal with some of the complexities that young people are experiencing in school. We were proposing some different kind of training within schools, but also different usage of support as well. So the plans around the usage of the inclusion fund were relatively loose deliberately because we do want to work with schools on how best that could be administered and used as well.
And I think, thank you for the report as well, because it's very clear in terms of the consultation, how it's been run and what the responses have been. Reading some of the individual responses, they describe a very good working relationship with the authority as well. And my concern is that we don't want to do anything to harm that relationship, do we? If it then goes to Cabinet and Cabinet approves going to Secretary of State for approval for this transfer, and so it's going to happen, saying if it does, do we then have, or is the plan then to go back to the schools and say, look, we understand why you don't want this transfer to happen, but it is going to happen. Can you now come on board and help us, target these actions?
Yeah, so you're right. I mean, the relationship with schools in order to deliver our education collectively is absolutely vital, and we know that we've got a good relationship with schools in delivering, and we're very fortunate in Leicestershire to have such good schools delivering for our children. It does put both parties in a really difficult position because this is about funding and this is about having the right funding to support the right needs as well, both in schools and from a local authority point of view. We are part of the Delivering Better Value programme with the DFE, and that programme is very much about looking at how the local authority can pull itself back into a balanced position around the high needs block. So part of this proposal around transfer is around doing everything we possibly can to meet some of the requirements of that scheme as well. Should the Secretary of State be minded to agree to the transfer, we then will be going back out to schools to say, please can we now work together on what this fund could look like, and certainly we'll be reaching out to them and kind of won't be working on our own to think through what that looks like. But yeah, the next stage is, should the Secretary of State agree, will be to go back out to schools to say, right, we've got this £2.6 million pounds. What could the intervention look like? How can we best utilise that? How can we best meet needs?
Thank you, Jane. I think we are now beginning to understand it a bit better. I've got Mr. Hunt. Did you want to come in at this stage, Mrs. Taylor, or should I take Max?
I'll finish when everyone else has asked their questions, Chair, if that's okay.
Fine. Mr. Hunt.
A little typo on paragraph 28. I think it's 28. Sorry, it's yeah. who could have got that date wrong? The paragraph 39 says it begins a process of understanding the local authority alone cannot resolve the financial problem and the co-ownership of the issues in future actions. I think that's a critical paragraph and sentence, and then it goes on to give the reasons why in figures form why the 0.05% won't do the job completely. In fact, to a limited degree. I think that's the first thing that we have to understand. And to that extent, it's probably not the time to discuss this, but it looks to me as if the TSIL programme, as described in 2020, 21, 22, has not achieved the expectations we had financially. May well have achieved lots of other things, but financially we're still stuck in the mire. So that sort of moves me on to where we are today. And I followed this previously when the question was asked previously to the Schools Forum. The Schools Forum gave a similar answer, described in short syllables. So the first thing is, if you get turned down once and second time, do you go back to the Schools Forum and try and negotiate something that they will accept? And it seems to me that certainly from where we are today, that's not going to be very fruitful. But that's a question. Is it worth going back to the Schools Forum and talking to them as adults in the room, as they say, to achieve something which will go perhaps not as far as we want today, but go some way. The second thing that is kind of absent from the report, we've been turned down by the DFE once. Is there something in the DFE's reply that we can pick up and address, or was it simply a blank no? And usually when even government ministries turn something down, reasons would be given, and I wondered if we'd actually address those reasons as fully as we can. A third thing that occurred to me reading the paper, it's perhaps a bit risky, but can we wait until we know more about the government's approach to this SEND problem, which isn't just in Leicestershire, it's not in all authorities, but it is widespread throughout the country. And it's widely understood now that the SEND system is a broken system in local authorities. So those are the three things that came to my mind. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Did you want to come back, Jane? And then did Jenny want to add anything?
I'm hoping Jenny will on one of them. Yeah, so just in terms of the impact of the block transfer, I think you're right in terms of if we just made a transfer between blocks and added the money to the deficit, it would have very little impact, which is why we were looking at the SEND Investment Fund to try and maximise impact. So you're right, the 2.6 billion is a drop in the ocean of the deficit, which is why we didn't want to do the straight block transfer. So absolutely right. In terms of the TSIL financial impact, you'll note at the top of, or on page 100, the TSIL programme defined opportunities line is the projected savings that are due to and some have been achieved through the TSIL programme. So we have seen some financial benefits from the TSIL programme. What's happened is that because of the rate of demand or rate of increase in education, health and care plans, whilst we have achieved what we set out to achieve within TSIL financially, it's not had the desired impact on the high needs block because demands continue to rise. So we have set out the programme benefits from TSIL kind of as part of the savings lines that we've got in there. Just in terms of your first question around going back to Schools Forum to negotiate, I think and it kind of links a little bit to the third question as well. Essentially, that it's a relatively black and white issue in the sense that we're asking the Schools Forum to agree to a transfer and a 0.5 transfer is the kind of lowest amount or the ceiling amount. So I think the challenge is, and you know, credit to Schools Forum, I'm not sure there's much to negotiate on. We could go back and try for a 0.4% transfer, but I think either way, the kind of rationale from Schools Forum is you shouldn't be taking money from the schools block in order to fund something else. So I'm not never wanting to say that it's not worth negotiating, but I'm not sure we've got much to negotiate on in terms of that transfer. In terms of the DfE response, I will hand over to Jenny for a bit more detail, but you know, what we know around the Secretary of State decision is it depends on a number of different things around why they would agree or not agree. And Jenny can share a little bit more about what happened last time, but also what they're expecting to see this time. And just in terms of that last question, can we wait until we know more about the government approach? I think that's a really good question. I think it's the right question to be asking. So what we know is that the government are looking carefully. We know from a number of things that they published and said is that they're looking really carefully about the SEND system and looking at what needs to happen in order to improve it for children and young people is essentially what the government approach is. Ideally, we would want to wait until we know what the new government approach to SEND is, but the challenge that we've got is that in order for us to progress with the transfer, we've got to go through a number of processes in order to get that done for 25-26. So we're limited if not held back completely in our ability to postpone any of this. We need to get it to Cabinet, we've got to go to the DfE, it needs to go to the Secretary of State for approval, and then we need to instigate the mechanisms to make the transfer. So unfortunately, we aren't able to wait until we know more. In the ideal world, that I think that would be the best solution, is for us to wait, but we don't have the time because of the processes. And I'll just ask Jenny just to add a little bit more about the DfE response around the block transfer, if that's okay. Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, okay, thank you. When we applied to do this before, we did get a response from the DfE, which wasn't a black and white response. The reason that was given for not approving that is there was no evidence of reinvestment into mainstream schools, which is why we've worked through this proposal to actually build that and to build that engagement with mainstream schools about how we would use this money to better invest. We don't know what the Secretary of State will say on this occasion. We do know that for transfers for the current financial year, so for 24-25, that all of the requests that were submitted to the Secretary of State were agreed. We're obviously in a different government, different Secretary of State at this moment in time. And whilst we have had conversations with DfE colleagues, they haven't been able really to give us sort of any idea about how such a proposal will land with the DfE this time around.
Thank you. Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come in at this stage?
Thank you, Chair. I think a lot of the stuff's been covered already, and there's been some really good questions and responses given. It is a really difficult and complex situation, and I, for one, do not want to take funding away from school. I think the schools should be given much more funding to enable them to support children with special educational needs and disabilities. But we are in the situation we're in. We have a high needs deficit that is growing year on year. We can't bring it back into budget because there's just not the funding available. Saying all that, what we need is the SEND reset, and there's been lots of national guidance put out and research done on that, and I think everyone is in agreement that the SEND system is broken and needs a reset. But in order to do that, you need to dual fund. So you need to continue doing what we're doing, but then you also need to put more funding into schools to make them able to be more inclusive, because we all are aware that schools are struggling at the moment with their finances, and they're finding it as difficult as we are. So we're all in this together, I think, is the message. We need to enable children to be fulfilling as much as they can. And I certainly don't want to sit here and take money off schools, but there is no option for us at the moment. With the Delivering Better Values scheme with the DfE, there's an expectation that we will do everything possible to bring things back into budget. And this is just one of those stepping stones. So I think we wait and see what the Secretary of State's done. I'll wait with interest to see what funding may come schools' way. But I think this amount that we're taking is not going to have a huge impact on our deficit, but what I'm hoping it will do is to change the culture within schools and help them to be more inclusive. And that's what I think we're trying to do at the moment. So leading the way as to what government want us to do and reset the SEND system. This is the start of it for me. I wouldn't be sitting here agreeing to just taking money out of the schools block and putting it into the high needs block and just letting it sit there. The fact that we're doing a reinvestment fund to look at how we can help schools be more inclusive across Leicestershire, I think is the way to go forward. So I am supporting this. I understand the views of the school forum. I was there at that meeting listening yesterday as well. So I'm well aware of schools and schools forum thoughts. I'm hoping we can maintain our really good relationships with school. I think they're all aware we're all in a really difficult financial climate and we need to be supporting and pulling in the same direction, not against each other. So I hope they understand the situation we're coming from. We certainly understand where they're coming from. And I think our only option is to take this to Cabinet now and see if it's approved by Cabinet and then on to the Secretary of State. But thank you for the opportunity to speak, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taylor, and thank you to Jenny and Jane as well. Has anybody got any final comments? No. Mrs. Jordan.
I don't know whether this is possible, but something that I think is a problem with SEND is that we're relying on private providers for the SEND education and the specialist treatment. Would it be possible in the future to bring those back into county council ownership or control?
Thanks, Mrs. Jordan. Are you referring to private providers for schools? Yeah. So yes, you're absolutely right. We do rely on independent schools to educate children with special educational needs, and we do that for two reasons. One is where their needs can't be met anywhere else, and the independent schools are able to provide them. But often it's a parental choice that children go to those provisions. So we're not able to bring those providers into local authority control because they are private schools and they're run privately. But the local authority, as you will be aware, has put about 700 additional school places into Leicestershire. They're all run by our academies, all through some of our special schools have been expanded as well. So we have had quite a programme of expansion of special schools. And we were hoping that as a result of that, we would have less reliance on the independent sector. What we found is that those spaces have been filled and filled quite quickly. And what it's meant is that we haven't increased our reliance on the independent sector, but our reliance on the independent sector has remained just because the numbers of children coming in who need provision have increased. So we continue to build more provision for children, and all of that provision is state run. It's not local authority run. The local authority doesn't have the ability to do that anymore, unfortunately. But all of those schools are state run, and they will all add to the kind of broad support that's available for children in Leicestershire.
Thank you very much. I see no further comments, but thank you very much for clarifying it. A very complex subject, Jane and Jenny particularly. Thank you. We now move on to item 11, which is the Leicestershire Fostering Agency statutory report. It starts on page 133 of your agenda pack. Sharon, are you taking us through this? And then Kelda? Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, so the report before the committee is a report, our annual report, fostering report for 23-24. And under the fostering regulations 2015, any fostering agency is required to produce and publish an annual report. So our authority is a fostering agency. We have a fostering agency, and therefore we need to provide the report, and the actual full report is attached to the papers with committee today. So background is that we undertake as the fostering agency statutory duties for the recruitment and retention of foster carers. Paragraph 6 in the report outlines for you the key areas of responsibility, right from and including the recruitment of carers, the assessment of those carers, the retention of them, and support to carers and our children right at the end, that's provided by our dedicated placement support team. So in summary, the report takes you through the data and the achievements from March 23 to March 24. We've approved 14 mainstream carers and 3 specialist carers. So committee will hopefully remember that we've talked in previous years about the development and growth of specialist carers who work with some children who have had perhaps the most complex life experiences, and it's an opportunity for them to be cared for in a family setting rather than residential. So it could be supporting their step down from residential care, it could be supporting them into adulthood. So that is a key part of the service and development that we are particularly proud of. We also have supported lodgings providers for our older young people. We've developed as part of the service independent visitors. So these are volunteers who spend time with a young person or child who's matched to them and spend time doing nice average things that are outside any sort of statutory relationship for the youngsters. So they have a really important place a part to play in our children's lives. The fostering service, paragraph 8 onwards, takes you through the makeup of the service and what activity takes place to support our young people who are in care. And paragraph 23 takes you through what some of the key priorities for March 24 to 25 are, and takes you through our targets for the continuation of recruitment of carers. So the actual annual report is attached with all the detail that I've just briefly outlined, and Joss Longman, who's the service manager for fostering, has actually joined us. So if there are any questions that committee members have, we're happy to take those.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Thank you. Welcome to Michelle and Joss, is it, for this item? A few weeks ago, I came along to an evening here to do with foster parents, and it was the ones that were interested, the ones that had already signed things, and one of the highlights, of course, was the choir. And it was a thoroughly enjoyable and really enlightening evening, and the young people in the choir were amazing. So before I open it up, Josh and Michelle, did you want to add anything to what Sharon's reported so far? No, right. Well, yes, I'll open it up now to anybody who's got. Ross.
Perfect, thank you, Chair. Well, thank you for the report, and I imagine this isn't a particularly easy area necessarily, fostering the children that are involved, and so I want to say well done on enabling what looks like such a positive department and process, and just picking out some of the little bits such as the activities that you do, the digital Christmas cards, fleeces for staff members. I think those little bits just show a care for the team. So thank you for that. And also, I think I picked up somewhere that there wasn't a single person that left the team over the last 12 months as well, which is an excellent sign, and that things are going right. Just curious, it says in the report that since COVID, the County Council is struggling to attract carers. Are there any particular reasons for that? And are our neighbours finding similar things as well?
it's a national, there is a national shortage of foster carers. There's been some research that the Department of Education have undertaken in relation to how many carers we nationally we're losing, but we're not getting those carers coming through. So we do meet with our neighbours in terms of how we perform, and actually Leicestershire performs considerably better than our neighbouring authorities in terms of recruiting foster carers and attracting carers who are transferring from an agency back into Leicestershire as well.
And I may be biased because I come into County Hall a lot, but I do see a lot of the adverts about fostering and, you know, open days and those sorts of things. So well done on that.
Thank you. Did anybody else have any comments? Mrs. Taylor, did you want to come back?
Just very quickly to say, the team are a very loving team, and you sense that whenever you speak to any of them. So yeah, they've done a really good job. So yeah, very welcome this report.
Thank you. Well, I'm sorry you didn't have to say. Mr. Hunt, you wanted to comment?
Well, I haven't said anything, and I'd agree with Ross that it's an excellent report, and it's about the one really useful thing in Leicestershire Matters.
No, I think it is, and I think it's one of those almost hidden services that people don't always realise, but very, very necessary. And I did have a chance to speak to some of the young people, and they are just so enthusiastic. And it's just a pity at times that I'm probably too old now to foster a child, but particularly a little one. But no, I thoroughly encourage it to everybody. Mr. Smith.
Chair. Yeah, I thought I'd just contribute at this point with regards to fostering. Exactly what Max has just said. Leicestershire Matters is great at getting it out there to the community, but I think also as corporate parents, we need to, as members, we need to put it out across our message as best as we can as well, because we can all contribute into making people aware and making people aware of the opportunities available for fostering as well.
Thank you. Well, I am tempted to encourage my fellow councillors, all of across the board, all 56 of them, well, 55 of them, because some of us, I'm here, is to read our reports, but particularly on fostering, and push it out. Because I think people sometimes think you have to have very, very specialised skills to be a foster parent, or they're going to ask for what's your education or what qualifications you've got, which that's not the bottom line. The bottom line is, can you help bring up a family? And but thank you very much, ladies, and thank you for joining us. I don't know if you want to say anything else before you go.
I'm here for the adoption report. Sorry, yeah, that's okay. I can leave now, though. Come on.
And we now do move on to the item 12, which is the Leicestershire Adoption Agency statutory report, which commences on page 187. And Sharon, are you taking us through this again? And then Michelle. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'll take you through a brief overview of the report, and Michelle Robinson is the service manager for our adoption service, so he's here to support and answer any questions. So the report before you outlines that as an adoption agency, we have a responsibility to provide an annual report. The full report is attached to the papers for committee members to read, and is the annual report from March 23 to 24. Paragraph 5 outlines for you what services are provided by our adoption service. So two main areas are the assessment and approval of prospective adopters and support to those adopters once approved, and then the matching of them as appropriate with those children where a best interest decision has been made that adoption is the right plan of permanence for that child, and the court agrees and makes an order, a placement order enabling the child to be adopted. There are also a very small number of children who are actually relinquished by their parents to be adopted. The service also provides a service to birth parents, so those parents whose children have been placed for adoption, to offer support to those birth parents, and we provide a post-adoption service, so that is the support that's there for children and adopters once a child at the start of the child's journey in adoption, and that is a service that over time, adopters can come back and ask for adoption support, and there is a national fund that is described later in the report. One of the key areas outlined in the report from paragraph 7 onwards explains that we as a local authority and adoption agency are part of a regional partnership, so it's an agreement with some other key authorities in the region to form the fostering adoption regional partnership. So legislation a number of years ago talked about authorities coming together to form regional adoption agencies. We made the decision, along with the other authorities that are part of the partnership, that we wanted to retain very much central to our services our adoption support and services. So we created and worked on the partnership. That partnership has actually been assessed. So Ofsted have come in and done a thematic inspection of a number of adoption regional agencies and our partnership as one of them, and spoke very positively about how the partnership works together on key areas of professional performance and developing key areas of the service. So paragraph 11 talks about how the partnership has enabled us to ensure that children waiting for adoption have a greater range and pool of prospective adopters for them, and some key areas of work around how we support children that in the past have been, we found it more difficult to find the right adopters for them, how we've worked creatively to secure some very, very successful adoptive placements and homes for those children. Paragraph 12 onwards takes you through some of the key performance data, and paragraph 15 outlines the key achievements that were made in 23-24. So it talks about the partnership that I've just outlined. It talks about the training across the partnership for prospective adopters and staff, and increasing that support to children and adopters. And paragraph 16 onwards takes you through some of the initial details of the numbers of people that came forward to be prospective adopters and how they've been taken through that process. And paragraph 19 onwards takes you through the number of children with a placement order. So that's an order made by court agreeing that that child's best permanence plan should be made via adoption, the number of children that we successfully placed with families during the period of the annual report. So that takes you through the key elements. Obviously, I hope you've had a chance to read the detailed report that's attached to the paper, and Michelle and I are happy to take any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Just before I open it up to discussion and questions, on page 189 under paragraph 14, could you just clarify again for me what a special guardianship order this, please?
Yes, so a special guardianship order granted by a court, and that can be made. It's an alternative to adoption, and it's an alternative to a child being in care. So a child could have been in our care and could have been placed with foster carers for a number of years, and those foster carers want to become legally the guardian for that child, so they can apply to court with our support and a special guardianship order can be made. So that enables the carer to become the legal guardian of that child. They can make all the decisions that a parent could make. They can, if appropriate, be assessed to also receive support. So it's not that it has to be a clean break with the local authority, but it gives that parental responsibility over to the guardians.
So they're not adopting, they're becoming a guardian. And to put it in, say, layman's term, I didn't want to adopt a grandchild, say, I could become a legal guardian for that child, but it still has, do the parents still have rights as well?
Yeah, it doesn't take away, so it doesn't change the legal that a child was changed the surname or not know who their birth family were. Quite often, a child subject to a special guardianship order does still have contact with all those people within the wider network, but it gives ultimate responsibility to the person that the court's made the special guardianship.
Thank you very much. Now, do I have Mr. Frisbee?
No, I'd just like to say it's a comprehensive and very clear report, and having been adopted by my stepdad, it's an issue that's very, and then went to live with my nan under a guardianship order. So I've been through this a little bit. I know this gig. I just think I think it's very robust. I think it's accessible. And I think with issues, including fostering and adopting, I think some people shy away from it because they think it's a minefield. So I just want to congratulate and thank the officers, if I may, for a very clear and transparent and robust report, which I hope will encourage other parents and custodians to look after our most treasured possessions, which are our children. So thank you from this side of.
Michelle, did you want to add anything?
No, thank you, but thank you for your comments.
Karen. Sorry, Jane. You're wearing similar colours.
I know, we do. We look the same. Either one will be fine. I just wanted to say for both fostering and adoption, this is, and I know members have said it, is such an important piece of work that goes on in the department, and absolute credit to the staff that work in both services, because they are the ones going out and finding either forever homes or long-term homes for our children, and they do it with love and care and compassion. And as Mr. Smith said, we are always looking for people who can provide a home for our children, and also who are interested in adoption. But yeah, just wanted to express my thanks. I think the work that the teams do is absolutely phenomenal in really supporting our children to have somewhere to live. Thank you.
Just a quick question on that, Jane, as well. It says on the report that 21, for last year for adoption, 44 initial visits were completed, 21 of which resulted in a stage 1 start. What were some of the reasons that these initial applications didn't go through to stage 1? And could some of them be more suitable for fostering if adoption wasn't the right way forward?
Yeah, this is Jane. I'll answer that one. Yeah, I'll answer, and I'm sure Michelle will join in if I miss anything. The initial visit is an opportunity not only for us to talk about and explain what adoption is really about and what the process, but the reality of being an adopter will be. And it's also a more detailed opportunity for the person that's made that initial inquiry to find out more about adoption. So sometimes Although those individuals don't go on to a further stage, it's not that it's not, it's positive that they've explored the extent of adoption and come to a decision that adoption's not right for them, or there may be things on occasion that they share that would mean that we would be concerned about them being adopters, or we don't think adoption's right for them. In all those opportunities, both with prospective adopters and foster carers, that discussion is a detailed discussion because some other aspects of our work might be right for somebody. So they might not be right for adoption, but we want to share with them or explore with them that fostering might be more appropriate for them. Or it could be that they become an independent visitor for us. And sometimes individuals have those initial discussions and decide that their personal circumstances mean that they want to not progress with that application or not progress with it for some time. Life has a way of throwing things up that makes changes, and by the time we visit and have those discussions, sometimes things have changed for those prospective adopters.
Sorry, colleagues, I was rather hoping that Debbie, who's referenced in the report, I think it would be unfair not to mention her because she's a champion and she's been championed in the report. So whoever the mysterious Debbie is, could you please feedback that being heralded as a champion is a great accolade?
I will do. I'll make sure that she hears that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Deborah Taylor, was there anything else you wanted to add to this?
Not much, Chair, just to say, it's obviously an excellent report. And again, the team work incredibly hard. And I think the most important part is obviously doing the recruitment, but it's the matching process that we go to. It's a great deal of love and care that goes into making sure we match the right children to the right parents for them.
I think our thanks by yourself to go back to the whole team. But I think it must also be very rewarding when it works out well. And obviously, like Mr. Frisbee here, we think it's worked out well. Very sure it has. Still working on it, but it must be very satisfying to find that the right child goes to the right parents and for love them, really.
It is very, very often send Sharon and Jane pictures of children once they're in their adoptive families and the order's been granted, and you can see those photos themselves then. So that is really rewarding.
Thank you very much. So the report's noted, but please do take our thanks back to the whole team. Was it a few years ago that we did it through the fostering adopting in the big shopping centre in Leicester when we had the book and the pictures? High Cross. I think you were there, Jane, with a daughter, and that was done by our children in care or children in fostering.
Yes, we did. We had some wonderful artwork that was produced by our children in care that was shown at the High Cross for a number of weeks. But yeah, really nice piece of work done with our children in care, and they'd done some beautiful artwork.
Again, I think there was a book that was done, and we were at one of the theatres.
Oh yes, we've done all sorts of things. Yeah, I mean that some of it will be touched on in the virtual school report that Beth will share with us as well. But yeah, I think you're rightly referring to a number of the pieces of work that we do with our children in care. So the artwork was one of them, and then another one was where they were also encouraged to write a little story or a little piece for a book that we published a number of years ago, and that was led through the virtual school.
I mentioned it because I was sorting out some books and I came across 2 copies that I got. I would still keep. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you. We now move on to item 13, which is the annual report of the Leicestershire Virtual School on page 221. And it is Alison and Donna. presenting this?
Actually, Beth Clements is the head.
Oh, right,
on there, yeah,
okay.
sorry, on the centre. Apologies.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to take you briefly through the report and then I'll answer any questions that follow. So the paragraphs 1 to 6 of the report are the reasons for the report to be written, the functions of the service, and you'll note that in paragraph 6 there's a change to the function of the virtual school. They now hold the non-statutory strategic role for children who have had a social worker in the past 6 years. This is a new duty, not to the local authority, but a new duty to the virtual school. And they have commenced with a lot of work across schools to support them to keep those children included in school. Paragraphs 7 to 18 move through the report of the summary of the work of the virtual school. I did want to draw your attention to paragraph 7, where it talks about the report being adapted to be a more visual representation of the work. Obviously, the report that you have doesn't reflect this, but you do have in your pack the data that accompanies it, and that is in a very similar format to the full report that the head of the virtual school presents. And it is written for children and directed at children so that they are able to see the work that is done around them and for them. Moving through, we've got a little bit of information about the personal education plan. So the work that the officers of the virtual school do in conjunction with the children's own school, making sure that anything that is needed to support their education is discussed, sought, and then funded where appropriate. So that is funded by the Pupil Premium Plus, which is referenced in paragraph 10. The attainment section within the report talks about the gaps. So we are awaiting some data that's not officially confirmed until next April, but the virtual school continue to work on closing that gap in attainment for young people, and part of that work is around making sure that suspensions and exclusions for persistent disruptive behaviour reduce, to keep those children in school and to upskill the schools to be able to work with them and to include them. We've got paragraph 14 around the unaccompanied asylum-seeking children. These become the responsibility in terms of their education of the virtual school as well. So we are seeing an increase there. With increased work for the virtual school. And then finally, we have the achievements and participation. So these outline the activities that the virtual school put on to make sure that those children and young people who don't have the same family background as other children have that enrichment opportunity, and their cultural capital is provided for them. Jane mentioned earlier around the book offer for children in the virtual school, as well as the arts work that goes on. And I did just want to draw your attention to the fact that the virtual school have been awarded the Platinum Award for their work with Artsmark. So a really proud moment for the school there. And then voice work continues. You have next steps in there as well. And we just end with a bit of a celebratory comment because the virtual school contributed towards the Ofsted inspection of the Children and Family Services. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. Did any Jane or Sharon want to know? I'll open it up to discussion. No? Well, again, excellent. Love it. So keep us informed if you're doing any more book writing, artwork, the one and only time I ever went to the High Cross was for that art exhibition.
Will do.
But no, please thank everybody. Deborah, did you want to come in at all as we're finishing the end of the meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Now, I think the report shows the vast amount of work that the virtual school does with all our children. So, yeah, credit to them all.
Thank you. Thank you very much, officers. And also, please go back to your departments and thank them very much for all their help and support. And I'll just remind the committee, same place next year on the 21st of January at 2 o'clock. So, and item 15, I have no urgent matters to discuss. Thank you all very much for attending. Thank you.